I'm really thrilled to introduce this panel that will help us understand different ways to learn and upskill ourselves. Felicia Rubinstien, she's the founder and chief collaborator of HAYVN, a women-centered co-working space where women can connect, create, and get stuff done. She's also the founder and managing partner of HAYVN Marketing. Co-working spaces is becoming a place where a lot of us, especially freelancers and individuals who choose to work in a flexible way, go to work, and allows us to connect to other people, learn what's new in the industry, and it's a method of upskilling. Ashley Ater Kranov is the executive director of the Quorum initiative, a community of executive women committed to creating a sustainable, thriving society where gender equality is the norm. And again, networks and industry associations are another way to learn and upskill and understand where you may take your direction or network or find that next opportunity. Jenny Blake, there you are, is the author of Pivot, The Only Move That Matters Is Your Next One, and host of Pivot podcast. She works with people and organizations on strategies for navigating change within innovative, heart-based businesses. Her motto, if change is the only constant, let's get better at it. And the moderator for this panel is Amy Armitage, the CEO of and founder of Nexus Peer Group, an executive networking firm serving senior HR investment professionals. Amy helps HR clients develop an investor lens on HR and advises HR teams on how to build business acumen and drive value creation.
That's great. Thank you, Stella and Leslie and Chris and Paula and all those that have really made this event terrific and made Amazing Community a terrific organization that I've been involved with now for over 2.5 years. And this is my second time at this event, and very exciting to see a lot of old friends and make many new ones. But I have to say, when we were looking at this the panel today, I was reading all the bios of the women that I'll introduce a little bit more of in a minute. And I was thinking new ways and tools for staying current really wasn't the title. It was more about what I would call the P's, or the 6 P's, because what you're going to see in the achievements here, a lot of it is about purpose and passion. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but also about the pivots. So many have had pivots in their careers, phenomenal pivots, and really new mindsets and career sets, and Jenny will probably talk about that in a minute. She has a book by that title, which, she just happens to have, which is one of my favorites, so I will give a little plug to that right from the start. But the purpose and the passion and the pivots, and there's also a lot of sort of persuasion and partnerships. That these are women who really have the ability to influence, and then finally it's push the envelope. Because I think that's really what's unique about the 3 women on this panel. So I'm going to start off a little bit with Felicia Rubinstien, who was just introduced, but she's the founder and chief collaborator, love that title, of the HAYVN co-working community, which is a woman-centric co-working community in Darien. How many of you are from Connecticut came on the train like me? Yeah, it's sort of great because she's also running a lot of community events. And Felicia, when you were starting this community, tell us a little bit more what was in your mind. You were creating a working space for women, but what was so important about the community side of creating something for women?
So I created HAYVN as really a place that I wanted to be involved in over my career. I mean, I really think HAYVN reflects exactly the obstacles that I encountered as a career working woman. And really community was the most important thing, to create a space where women felt comfortable to participate wherever they were in their career or in their career transition. And it's a space where in Fairfield County, I don't know if the people that raised their hands from Connecticut, there are over 58 women's networking organizations in the area. And you wind up finding yourself, if you are, wherever you are in your career, if you're working in a company or trying to make that career transition, and you're trying to figure out what to do, you're running around to all these networking events. So I felt like there should be, and I kept seeing people all over the place, and the same people, and I thought, why not create a space where people can all meet, grab that cup of coffee, and then go on and do their work or whatever they have to do. So that's kind of how I view this community.
And yet you've done much more because you've got networking events, there's a lot of learning and education. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we've been open for 4 months now. I had this in the works for the past 2 years planning this. We've had over 100 events, and they're all over the board, again, depending where you are in your career. There's events for new moms that are trying to connect and figure out how to step off the workforce. There's events for women that are have launched their kids and are ready to relaunch their careers. So we have some huddle groups, and it can go beyond that, where we have a 6-week course that you can take. You can work in the co-working space and get the help that you need. We have pitch nights for founders. We call it HAYVN Hatch. It's like Shark Tank, but we really call it like the dolphin tank. It's kind, and we do this every couple of months, and the winners get to work in the space and get the support that they need. We have a fitness center in the space, so that's a lot of fun. I'm finding in Connecticut, where we live, there are a lot of people that are into mindfulness, acupuncture, all sorts of health type careers that they're relaunching into. So we have a HAYVN Health Fair, and that's been phenomenal. Beyond just people coming in and finding those resources, the companies are connecting with each other.
Great. Super. Well, I'm going to turn to Ashley now. Ashley Kranov, who comes from recently relocated to Baltimore, Maryland after a very interesting career. I want her to share with you a little bit. But she is now the executive director of the Quorum initiative, whose mission is to advance executive women to have greater impact in business culture and public policy. Also a professor of electrical engineering at WashU, Washington State University. Ashley, you've been in this STEM education business for some time, and yet what you shared with me earlier this morning was that it wasn't really the STEM skills that were so critical. You've been in Saudi Arabia and all around the globe, really helping to drive educational initiatives for women. Could you tell us a little bit more about, you're trying to close the gap on some of these critical skills?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear myself. Thank you so much. First, it's just a real honor to be here and among all these amazing women. I've already, in the last couple of days, learned so much from you and from the panelists, and so that's been great. And in part, it is also great because I've really spent the last 12 months trying to break back into the U.S. Scene, and also expanding my network within the United States has really atrophied. And when I found myself the summer before last with my appendix bursting on the way to Saudi Arabia, rethinking and turning 50 when I got back from that particular project, rethinking what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, essentially. And so what I realized was that I needed to reestablish my network within the Mid-Atlantic, New York region, and find a job that didn't require me to commute 15 hours at a time, be away from my family. I have 3 kids, 3 weeks to 6 months at a time, and that type of thing. And it was so much harder than I thought it would be. And it was, I spoke with a number of women here today, and yesterday, about how isolating it can be to be searching for a job, know that you have lots of employable skills, you're a master of employability skills, and that we've heard about today, creativity, problem solving, basically you can pivot and do anything really, and really well, better than most people, right? But truly it really does come down to your community and being able to reach out to your networks. And so that was reestablishing that and establishing new connections has been so much more difficult than I thought it would be. Particularly when you wake up in the morning and you feel really awful and like a major loser, you know, and have to build yourself up and go out and you know, put your professional face on and not let everyone see that you're feeling that way. It's really hard. So that didn't answer your question at all, sorry.
That's all right. You want me to rephrase the question, but that was a good lead-in.
Yeah, so I guess the main point of me bringing that to the table is that I can really relate to the stories that I'm hearing today. And I never ever thought it would be so difficult to re-enter the workforce. And I never thought that I would be in the position that I'm currently in, but I'm very excited about that. The Quorum Initiative is a membership organization dedicated to accelerating women's leadership and gender parity in executive positions. And so I've been in executive positions primarily in academia and with my own consulting firm where I worked with universities to make sure that their engineering and computing academic programs were aligned with industry needs, so what employers want, and quality assurance organizations, so compliance, accreditation, and this kind of thing. And the last few years have really found me primarily, before I started this long, grueling job search, found me in the Middle East, primarily in the Gulf region, very much so in Saudi Arabia, also in Kuwait, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Jordan, Tunisia, Lebanon. And in those countries, something that I started noticing actually many years earlier when I was managing director of HAYVN, the world leader in technical education, was they have so many more women in engineering and computing than we do. And not just so many more. I just remember the first time I stepped into Kuwait University's electrical engineering department and I'm realizing that 60% of the students are women. And in my electrical engineering department at Washington State University, where I've been since 2009, I think right now we have maybe 4 women out of something like 50 faculty, and that's quite common here. And you have an engineering background, so you know about that. And so I started wondering, what is going on? I saw this replicated throughout the Gulf region. And for many of us, we have deep assumptions and biases about those cultures in those countries and what roles that women play and how they can work and all this sort of business. And so what I started to discover was that, and so in general, what I have found, and I'm principal investigator on a U.S. National Science Foundation, looking into why so many women in majority Muslim countries pursue and persist in engineering and computing, so that we can address that issue more effectively here in the United States. And so what we're finding is pretty interesting, that the women not only are in greater numbers, but they tend to outperform the men. And I wouldn't say that they outperform the men for the reasons that our panelist earlier, Francesco, stated, in part because I'm one of these hardcore researchers who wants to really have correlation and cause effect and that sort of thing. And so what we're finding is that the women place much greater store on having what I would call employability skills. So having a much more holistic skill set than many of the men in the countries that we're working in, and really making sure that they speak other languages, not only technical languages, but also languages like English or Arabic or French or whatever other languages, and really being able to do all of the things that we've heard about today around the creativity, collaboration, being able to work in dispersed teams in virtual settings, across sectors, being able to work across different disciplines. And they do that to the extent that one of the universities that I've worked closely with in Saudi Arabia, they're finding that that all of the companies within Saudi Arabia, the international countries, the Saudi-based companies, they want to hire their women more than any of the men in the top engineering and computing programs within Saudi Arabia itself. And these women are the ones who are winning all the competitions worldwide. It's just tremendous. And so we haven't finished our complete analysis of the data that we've gotten over the last 4 years for this project. But one of the things that I realized today, and I just hadn't couched it that way, but within the conversations we've been having, is that truly it's because these women are both interested and able and willing to cultivate a skill set that is quite tremendous and holistic. And we all have that, but sometimes we don't quite recognize it and we don't highlight it. And for many of them, it's also a case of in particular in Saudi Arabia, you can't take away these skills from them, right? It's something you own. Education, you own that, and your ability to, these skill sets. That's not something that can be taken away. And so that's something I think that we might not fully realize as much as we should, and I've spoken too much already.
That's great. No, I think that's a wonderful setup, and I still find it hard to believe, though, that your move to Baltimore was more challenging than global educational partnerships in Saudi Arabia.
Oh, you know what, though? Every once in a while, still now, I'm like, oh, can't I just go back? Please?
Go back to the easy days in Saudi Arabia. Okay, so I want to introduce Jenny Blake now, and I love your title, though, Jenny. Chief Amazingness Officer at Jenny Blake Enterprises. I think that wins the prize. But you see the book here. Jenny's the author of one of my very favorite career books, Pivot, The Only Move That Matters Is Your Next. And she basically said, and I love this quote, I wrote this book to help us all get better at mapping what's next by doubling down on what is already working. She also wrote a book called Life After College while she was working at Google. So Jenny, do you want to tell us a little bit about what motivated you to write this book, Pivot, and tell us a little bit about the pivots you've made in your own life.
Sure. What motivated me mostly was feeling not very resilient to change. I felt that I was having these big existential life crises every 2 years, starting at 20 and then again at 22 and then again at 24. And even while working at Google, the Disneyland of companies, in fact, as I was thinking of leaving Google to launch my first book and go full time, one of my mentors, a career coach on the outside, said to me, oh, you're leaving? Can you put in my resume? I'd like to have your job. And that made me so terrified of ever leaving. No one in my family really thought it was a good idea. This story is now more and more in the entrepreneurship press. Like, well, I left my 6-figure job. But at the time, it was very terrifying. And I basically felt that I was in a raft in the ocean of change, and everyone else was in a cruise liner, like sailing merrily along, and I was getting rocked by every wave. What I came to find out when I started doing the research for Pivot, and I will say, they say necessity is the master of invention. It wasn't until 2 years after leaving Google, when my business was about to collapse, and there was no paycheck funding the exploration of what's next, that I really freaked out. And I realized that out of hundreds of business and personal development and career books that I had read, not one was helping me figure out how to pay the rent in 2 weeks. So that is why I had to look. I was so focused on what I didn't know, what I didn't want, what I didn't have, that none of that was gonna pay the rent. None of that would propel me forward. And that's what sparked this idea of a basketball player. One foot stays planted, that's their stability, their strength, that's what's already working. The skills, the network, the strengths, the energizers, what you love doing that you already have, and then building methodically from that into the new direction. And it sounds obvious, but I think when we're in the moment of uncertainty, of not knowing what's next, it's so easy to look out there. There's going to be a job board, a mentor, an answer, software out there, somewhere outside of me that I don't yet have, and it's the opposite. So the big discovery I made when I started doing the research for Pivot was how many people would say to me, oh my God, I need that book. I'm in the middle of a pivot right now. And that sentiment has not changed. The book came out 3 years ago. The big secret is that everybody is pivoting. There's not one person I meet that hasn't just pivoted or is in the middle of a pivot or is thinking about a pivot. And a lot of us tend to take it personally. I know I did. That when I was hitting a plateau or a pivot point, what I now call it instead of a crisis, at Google, I remember thinking, what's wrong with me? I must be one of those entitled millennials that the media keeps talking about. That I'm never going to be happy. If I can't be happy here, I'm doomed for the rest of my career. And even, oh, now I quit. Now I'm 2 years into my own business. Well, if I can't be happy here, then again, I must be the problem. And so part of what I've discovered about pivoting as well is that just because you're at a pivot point, and part of my goal with this book is very neutral language around career change and mapping what's next, Because just because you're at a plateau, that's actually a sign of a growth-oriented individual. You've outgrown the previous thing that you were doing, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 5, 10, and now you're ready to grow, you're ready for change. So I wasted a lot of time taking it personally as some kind of personal shortcoming, that something was wrong with me. And even, I think sometimes you can come to a room like this and think, everyone else has it figured out. Everyone else knows how to use this software, this learning platform, or even those of us sitting up here, oh, we have something figured out. Not really. It's just the ability, I think, to over and over drop any self-flagellation, I guess, that comes with change, and just saying, great, I'm at a pivot point. How can I build on what's working and shift that into what's next? And nobody knows the answer to that. It's about small experiments. You just got to line up those little small experiments and let them show you. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
Jenny, were there things that you did just to change your own mindset about, your inner talk, or how you thought about your pivot in a more positive sense versus I'm dissatisfied? How did you go into that positive?
There's a lot in the self-help sphere that's very masculine. That's like, you gotta crush your fear, smash your fear, you gotta hustle, grit, grind. It's exhausting. So the first thing I did was drop all of that. One of my work mantras is let it be easy, let it be fun. And if it's not, I pause and I re-examine my approach. So I really believe we can still work hard, we can still be committed, and yet do it with a sense of ease and joy. Even a lot of authors, you'll hear them say, oh, writing a book, it's so hard. And maybe some of you want to write a book. My language around the second book, I told myself I would never once say that, because then I'm telling myself a story that this is so hard. And who wants to read a book where like the person who produced it has been miserable for 3 years, but I brought you this on the other side. So I just thought, if I'm not having fun, I really believe that, like cooking, they say if you bake something with love, the people who eat it can taste it. So I really believe that how we work is as important as whatever we're producing. And to that end, there can be a calm way of working. There's this great book called It Doesn't Have to Be Crazy at Work. They created software called Basecamp. I use Asana if you're looking for project management. Trello came up earlier, that's a side note. But a calm company, what does that mean? A calm career, what does that mean? And then when it comes to fear, anxiety, and insecurity, because I noticed that those are the co-pilots of change. There's like excitement and a desire to grow, and in equal parts, insecurity, anxiety, and uncertainty. And I had to stop trying to make those go away. I even think we have a lot of derogatory language in our culture around fear, or your inner critic. You gotta just, there was a hashtag I saw the other day, F fear, which was fight fear. Well, all that does is create a war inside of yourself. You're now fighting or trying to suppress a very natural response, which is fear, because careers threaten our livelihood. It's our way to pay for our life and our families. So instead, I adopted the motto, domesticating dragons, that rather than trying to slay fear dragons, as again, that's so violent, let's just it's like a golden retriever, oh, hey, fear, how do we just domesticate, accept, welcome our fear and anxiety and insecurity? We all have it, and for me, it never worked to try to make it go away. I just had to acknowledge that I'm not that type of person that was born with this unshakable confidence, but the important thing is that I take the steps anyway. So I think the only difference is just accepting, oh wow, look at how much fear I have. Oh, my friend Julie got a VP job at Chanel. She said she had imposter syndrome for 2 years. The first 2 years in that position, and that's at the VP level of her dream job. So we all have it. Great. I think you just keep going.
I'm curious, Felicia, whether you've had a number of pivots in your career. You actually have I think a master's in biomedical engineering and also an engineering degree. You started an ad agency, which is how I got to know you, because you were working, doing a lot of marketing and branding and strategic work, and worked with my husband's business. But have you noticed something different now that you're moving into the HAYVN and this women's community? Is it different, or is fear being pushed out, or are we just learning to deal with it?
Yeah, actually, it's funny because a lot of people say, weren't you afraid of doing this or what a risk? And I think one thing that I said when we had that call before, like, again, obstacles created my pathway. And I feel like I'm at my pinnacle right now of everything that I've had in my career wherever it was. And now what I'm doing right now with HAYVN is, it's kind of a culmination of, and it's not a fear, it's not a risk, it's, I have to do this because it's something that's unique to me, and unique to a lot of my friends and everybody I've met. Like, everybody here is kind of in this phase trying to figure out what, where they fit and what makes them unique, and I feel like I'm creating this space for it. So it's more of a passion for me right now and not a fear. And I don't know if it's like from up above or whatever, I'm like, this has to be done. Just again, with what's happened with politics and everything else, this is just a place I have to be, and I'm not tired, I'm not feeling like I'm slaying a dragon. I'm working mega hours. I see some of my people here, but it's just a fun, exciting time, and I feel like I'm making a difference.
Wow. So you've just added another P to this purpose, passion, pivots, pushing the envelope, persuasion, and now pinnacle, if we can bring all of these together. I'm wondering, Ashley, if you could add a little to this about what you're doing now with the Quorum initiative, because you're doing a lot of leadership training and development and some of these soft skills, which are really the hard skills. Can you talk a little bit about the pinnacle of where you are now?
Sure, yeah, I guess first I want to say too is that there's not just one pinnacle, right? So who knows what the next one's going to be.
Yeah.
There are just so many, thank you for your direction. I feel like we have so many exciting topics and all today and everything, so it's good you're keeping me on track here. I just wanted to already go off in another direction. At the Quorum Initiative, like I said earlier, essentially we are a membership organization, but what we really are is a community of women who are really dedicated to each other. And one of the things that has been a thread throughout my relationship with Quorum, which actually started back in 2011, when I was managing director of ABET, the world leader in technical education accreditation, I found myself pretty isolated. Why? Because leaving academia, coming into an international organization and being expected to lead a substantial portion of its profit loss was different, right? That was a pivot. But also because I was the youngest and the only woman on the fairly small executive staff. And so I look at that experience at ABET as both the best and the worst experience in my life. And in part because it provided lots of hurdles and challenges, right, that could be accepted and learned from and channeled in other ways. And Quorum Initiative had just opened a chapter in DC in 2011, and I reconnected with a woman that I was good friends with in college, and she introduced me to the founder of the organization. And so it was that community of women where we could really be vulnerable with one another, and yet at the same time be able to pull each other up when we needed it, and to connect each other with other women who had similar strengths, who had connections within the community. It was through the Quorum Initiative really that I started to understand the importance of, I think I had understood it on a real sort of an internal level, but I hadn't had a meta-awareness of it, but how important forming alliances is. With not only other women, but obviously with men, and also intergenerationally. Some people spoke about that earlier today. And being able to, so what I found through the Quorum Initiative as a member previously for many years now is a community that really helped me not only identify my own individual strengths, right? Sometimes we don't see our own individual strengths as clearly as we might. And then also being able to not only identify those, which is first, but then be able to harness them. And once you are able to identify and harness your own individual strengths, and then link arms with others, right? Thinking of an alliance, lifting as you climb, this kind of thing, then you can really leverage one another's strengths and really achieve goals in ways that I found not possible, working within isolation. And when we're at our most vulnerable, we tend to want to isolate, and that's really when we need to be reaching out the most. And so that's what I found with the Quorum Initiative. And when I came back the summer of 2018, and wait, is it? It's 2019, right? Yeah. And don't you feel like somebody pressed the time warp speed button? You know, it's like, wait, what happened? What I found was that it took me a while to even reach back out to the Quorum Initiative community. I didn't know what story to tell. I really felt at a loss. And what I found once I did it were open arms, you know? Like, oh man, we haven't seen you since 2015, but we remember you, and you know, let's do something together. And so I reconnected as a member, and then I noticed that there was a position open for the executive director. The woman who was a friend of mine who ended up leaving, and she pivoted into a completely other a new sector, and so. It was just an incredible opportunity to get behind a vision and a mission that I've always felt was really important, but really linking arms with all the women who make up our community. And so we do, I'll stop in just a sec, sorry. We offer a number of what we call content events every year, not as many events that are at HAYVN. I want to move to Connecticut now. But about two content events every season. The focus, for example, of this season is advocating for yourself and others. The first session was called Speak Up and Make an Ask, right, so individual. And then the next one that's coming up here in New York City, and then later in DC, Chicago, and London, those are our chapter markets, is Speak Up and Act Collectively, so really personifying this. And so we provide, I would say, less structured types of professional development, so not the skill share, not particular courses that you can take. We don't currently, but may in the future offer credit, based types of things. But if you're looking for a community of women who are really, it's a small community, dedicated to one another, helping you in all the ways that you might imagine, then Quorum is one of those places to go.
Jenny, I wonder if you could address that issue of reaching out to a community, and another issue which I think Ashley brought up, which is sort of integrating parts of yourself.
Mm-hmm. What for me, well, I'm a big introvert. I guess that's the secret of someone who has a career like me that's talking to big groups of people. I really don't like the word networking, and even research shows it gives people highs, that one word. So I think it's important to do this in an authentic way. If I were to come to an event like this as a participant, I would focus on meeting one friend, one soul connection where you were magnetized to that person. So I think there's a lot of permission around how you like to connect. What is networking? It's making friends. That's it. There can be no shoulds, whether you're networking or reskilling. I think shoulds actually really weigh us down. So for me, with my network, what has been helpful is connecting based on skills that the other needs, just like you said, alliances. And I call it the drafting technique, where you find someone farther ahead in what you're trying to do, and you let them know, hey, I'm available if you have overflow that you can't fulfill. And I think, yes, it's relevant if you're self-employed or a consultant, and then it can also happen career-wise as well, where I've had a lot of people pass me work just because I let them know what I was interested in and able to help out with, when they either weren't available, couldn't take that work, and so they passed it down, and vice versa. The other thing is, I never ask somebody if I can pick their brain. I think it's just so intrusive and one-sided, and it just doesn't sound that compelling to the person on the other end of the request. So I never reach out and say, can I pick your brain? I like to set up, I call them Brilliance Barter or 30-30s, where I say, I would love to learn about this for 30 minutes, and I'm happy to help you brainstorm or talk through something for 30 minutes, and here's what I'm good at. And you'd be surprised, sometimes somebody, no matter how the levels or ages or stages vary, everybody needs a second opinion on something that they're doing. So I think I prefer to set up networking in that way. And the last thing I'll say is that I get very antsy just having too many calls in a day. And I know if someone were to reach out to me here in New York, I've had people successfully, I'll say no if it's, can we set up a call? But they'll say, you want to take a Pilates or a yoga class or go for a walk? And in that case, I'll say, sure, why not? Because I get to do some exercise. So I think also to be creative about how you reach out to people in a way that supports their day as well and their energy. That I found really helpful. And I've also done pop-up masterminds. So I just hosted one in my living room the other day. A few colleagues wanted to learn more about licensing. I did license pivot to large organizations. And they're very successful in their career. They just don't know the first thing about licensing. So they came over, we had snacks, coffee, and I just gave a master class for 3 hours. And that was an example of, I just know that will circle back somehow. And there's one woman has been very helpful to me recommending work and clients. And so I think those mutually beneficial friendships that really energize you and where you can have a skill exchange, then instead of trying to find a mentor that's above or in front, you're actually spiraling upward with your peers, really building on the alliance piece.
So finding people that energize you and help you to get to your goals.
And a mutual exchange of value. Because I think the problem with the advice to find a mentor is it feels so one-sided. And then it's not that, unless the mentor just, you have this instant connection and they say, oh wow, how can I help? It just feels like so much more of a chase. I'd rather network with peers and exchange information as we learn and grow and move forward, rather than constantly trying to reach out and get all the no's or the silent, I actually just earned my way into those conversations by adding value. And I'll say one of the things I did when I was 27, when Life After College came out, I organized a 15-tab book marketing spreadsheet. And I thought if anyone knew about this spreadsheet, they would think I was crazy, that I had lost my mind. And I got a chance to present for Seth Godin and his team. He's a popular marketing thinker, author. He's a wonderful person. And he said, this is great, can I share it? To this day, I'll show up at a book launch party with someone that I don't know, and the author will say, oh, you're Jenny Blake? I used your template for launching my book. So that's an example of a way that I added value, even into the future, without realizing it, by sharing some niche skill, which is organizing information in spreadsheets. So I think you'd be very surprised at how one specific slice of your mind, if you would just make it public and open source, can serve you and help you network where people are excited to meet you for years. If you just put what's already in your head and in behind the scenes in your organization, your processes, how you work your mind and your career, and make that public.
Great. I'm sort of feeling this kind of collective sigh of relief, right, after this panel. It doesn't really have to be that hard. You can get over the barriers, you can work through it, but you can also sort of have fun and build community and learn new skills and kind of move into that leadership position. So I think we're probably close to time. Do we have time for audience questions or one or two questions from the audience? I want to thank you, ladies, very much for, I think, a very inspiring presentation.